I remember back when I was riding bulls, Monday nights were always the call-ins, and I can remember four or five of us all being in the same room together who were planning on entering up. And all of us had our cell phones in our hand, had the house phone in the other hand, and we're pressing redial, hang up, redial, hang up, redial, hang up. And we just keep going until somebody finally gets in, and hopefully you get in time where you can get everybody in for the bull riding. But there were a couple of times you get through and you hear, sorry, we're full up. We got some slots in the amateur division, or you could, toss that rodeo and go to a jackpot. Maybe you're trying to enter up for a 5,000 added event. You could toss that and just decide you're going to go to a jackpot for a lot less money. Always hated having to come up with a plan B. Always wanted plan A to be what worked, because plan B was never as good. What about in our Christian lives? When we sin, when we fail to do what God has asked us to do, and we come to that point in our lives where, oh man, I really messed up, and now I know I messed up. Am I on plan B because I messed up? This is Jesse Horton with Cowboys of the Cross, and this is The Short Go. I want to direct your attention to Luke chapter 15. This is the story of the prodigal son. It starts at verse 11 and goes through verse 32. I'm going to skip most of that. Most of us are familiar with the story of the prodigal son. He decided to tell his father that he wanted his inheritance before the father was even dead, which meant that the father had to sell off some land, sell off some livestock, maybe some buildings or something, because they didn't just keep a lot of cash laying around. So he had to liquidate some of his assets in order to give his son his share of the inheritance. And he did that. And his son went off into some faraway country and spent his money on wild living, drinking and prostitutes probably. And he became in need. He ran out of money, and then there's a famine, and he finds out that he didn't have the friends he thought he had. They were only his friends while he had money. And he ends up working for a pig farmer, which was a pretty repulsive thing for a young Jewish boy to be doing. But finally he comes to his senses and says, you know what, I had it so much better back at my dad's house. So I think I'm going to go back to him. And what he did, he decided he was going to rehearse a confession. And his confession was, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. So he expected that he was never going to be his father's son again, but maybe he could be like a hired hand. And at verse 20 is where I want to start reading for you. It says, he arose and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. So the son came to his father expecting never to be called his father's son again. He expected he was on plan B. Things would never be as good as they used to before he had sinned against his father. But I want you to see that the father's compassion is what restores him to full sonship. He said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And with that confession, the father cut him off. You don't have to earn your place with the Father. You don't have to earn God's love. And you don't have to settle for plan B either. Because God the Father wants to restore you back to plan A. All it takes is you coming to your senses, realizing that you have sinned against heaven and before God Almighty, and confess that you are not worthy to be called a son of God or a daughter of God. The Father will put the best robe on you. He'll clothe you with his own robe, with his own righteousness. And he'll put a ring on your hand. He'll give you the ability and the authority to do business in his kingdom. And he'll put shoes on your feet because you're not a slave. You're not a second-rate citizen because you sinned and messed up. Now, God restores you to full sonship when you confess your sin and your need for him. It's Jesse Horton with Cowboys of the Cross. This has been The Short Go. I hope you find it encouraging.